So, what the heck is an MCP and why is everyone talking about it? Well, imagine you ask a large language model, get tomorrow's weather, and if it's sunny, text my friends a very excited, funny message inviting them to play basketball. And then the LLM, your AI, gives you the perfect message and it's very funny, amazing message, but then you realize one problem doesn't have the right forecast for tomorrow's weather. It just made it up. Doesn't have access to that real-time data. And also, it doesn't have access to send text messages to your friends. And that's a problem. So it's pretty much useless in terms of the task. So today, I'll explain why this is and how the MCP protocol solves this problem by using the story of the wedding planner chaos. So meet Sarah, the most talented wedding planner in the city. She has encyclopedic knowledge of weddings and she can design perfect celebrations in her head. But there's one problem. She works completely alone and has no way to contact vendors, nor does she know any vendors to contact. She has no access to real-time information of what DJs are available, what types of playlists they're playing, what food options are available, or even what florists are available. So when the bride asks for a romantic spring wedding with dancing and vegetarian food and R&B music, Sarah describes the perfect vision. Exact rose shades, ideal playlists, elegant menus, but she can't make any of it happen because she doesn't have access to the real-time florists and DJs and chefs that would be available for that day. So in this case, Sarah is like a large language model because LLMs are limited to their training data with a specific knowledge cutoff date, meaning they can't access real-time information or events that occurred after their training was completed. But now, what if we enable Sarah with some real-time information? Let's say Sarah discovers that there are some vendors in the city. We give her the plug, we hook her up with some vendors. Now she suddenly can access the florists, the DJs, and the caterers. But each vendor has their, let's say, unique communication style. The flower vendor is an Italian grandmother who only speaks in passionate Italian hand gestures and food metaphors. You want roses? Well, you better gesture primavera, amore, mwah, while kissing your fingertips. The DJ, the DJ is some Gen Z person, a little bit too hip for everybody, and only communicates through TikTok dances and emojis. So you better know how to parse those emojis to understand what the DJ is saying. And the caterer, ex-military, only responds to radio commands, requesting plant-based sustenance over. Okay, well, these are pretty unique ways of communicating. Sarah was initially excited that she thought this was going to be quick, but realizes that it'll be not very quick because she will have to spend a lot of time and energy learning these different communication styles so that she can effectively communicate the right things and make the event happen properly. So Sarah went from perfect theoretical knowledge, but with no vendor access, to having vendor access, but what now has communication chaos. So she spends most of her time learning these communication protocols rather than actually planning the wedding. Now, how does this relate to the LLM? Well, how would we give software applications, how have we traditionally given software applications access to external real-time data like the weather data or contact list or database data? APIs. We used HTTP protocol for a REST APIs, for example. And the problem is with LLMs, if LLMs were to rely only on APIs, like we've been used to, then it creates a similar problem for the LLM, where the LLM has to learn about these different APIs because each API has their own way of communicating, different authentication ways. If you wanted to access something from a database, you better have the right way to authenticate through it. Different parameters or types of information you need to send it in a certain format, and then be able to expect a certain response format from the APIs themselves. And so therefore, there's a lot of documentation and nuances with some of these APIs that the LLM would have to learn, just like Sarah would have to learn. But Sarah figured it out. She learned Italian hand gestures and emojis and TikTok dances. And the LLM, I gave it some of the API documentations. It can do it. So what's the problem? Why can't LLMs just use REST APIs like the rest of us? Get it? I'll stop. Anyways, it's because what if, in this analogy, in the wedding planning analogy, what if the wedding planning company hires Jake, who also needs to learn Italian gestures, TikTok dances, and military commands? That's similar to what if there's a new LLM? Well, that new LLM also needs to understand how to talk to these APIs. Okay, no problem, kind of, but it's getting a little bit more hard to maintain because now there's more training involved for the staff. Similarly, now there's more context being used up for these LLMs. Well, then also, what if the wedding planner company decided, hey, we're going to move on to a different vendor. So now the vendors change. The Italian grandmother is replaced by a French mime that only communicates in mime language. The teenage DJ replaced by a classical musician, only responds to musical notes. And both planners, Jake and Sarah, must also unlearn those old methods of getting the real-time data and master these new ways. Now they have to learn French mime and other things, right? That's a problem. That's hard to scale, and not everyone has the same way of standardizing these communications. And as things continue to change, it'll be chaos. So, and every new vendor means retraining all the staff members. Yeah, that's similar to how an API change breaks every AI application. This is like if LLMs relied only on REST APIs, they'd face the chaos from token waste by burning expensive tokens to parse API docs repeatedly. They'll also hallucinate more often. Some of these API docs, they're kind of maybe just filling in the parameters. There might be security nightmares, especially if there's authentication involved for these APIs, because the API keys are being sent in through the prompt instead of some secure server. So that's a problem. So what's the solution for this wedding chaos? Well, imagine in the wedding scenario, there is a universal wedding coordination picture book where everyone just communicates using pictures. So you got to talk to the Italian grandmother. Well, you don't have to really do the Italian gestures anymore. You can just show her a picture of the flower that you want. And then the Italian grandmother also is trained to understand how to read these images, these pictures, to give you what you want. So now they just talk in these little photos, for example, or they talk in some shared way that they all can understand. And everyone just has to learn that one shared way of communication. In this case, that picture book is the model context protocol for AI. It's one standardized interface for all data sources. New AIs learn one protocol instead of dozens of APIs individually. And then if the vendor changes, for example, or if the API changes, Just the MCP server that communicates to that service will update, but the AIs don't have to also update the way that they communicate with these servers. And now that creates a clean, unified interface replacing chaos. So all in all, MCP transforms AIs from isolated geniuses to communication chaos to efficient orchestrators. Your AI goes from Sarah alone in her office to frantically gesturing at vendors to actually coordinating the perfect wedding through a shared system that everyone understands. And there you have it. That's why we need MCPs, and that's why LLMs can't just rely on REST like the rest of us.